You hear endless debates about boomers. You see constant analysis of millennials and Generation Z. Entire industries exist to decode younger generations, their habits, their anxieties, their politics, their attention spans. But before all of them, there was a generation that rarely spoke about itself. Born between 1928 and 1945, they are known as the silent generation, and their silence was not accidental, it was learned. To understand them, you have to begin in the early 1930s. Imagine being 5 years old in 1933. The Great Depression is not an economic event to you. It is not a graph or a statistic. It is the sound of your parents whispering at the dinner table. It is the way your mother counts coins twice before leaving the house. It is the empty space on the pantry shelf where food used to be. Children do not need explanations to absorb instability. They feel it in tone, in posture, in silence. Developmental psychology tells us that early exposure to economic uncertainty heightens vigilance. When scarcity is normal, your nervous system adjusts. Security becomes more important than expression. Stability becomes more important than emotion. That is the first psychological imprint of the silent generation. Scarcity did not just affect what they owned, it affected how they thought. But scarcity alone does not define them. War does. By the time many members reached adolescence, the world was at war. World War II was not distant background noise. It was ration cards. It was blackout curtains. It was letters from older brothers stationed overseas. It was factory shifts running through the night. It was authority delivered without negotiation. In times of existential threat, societies narrow their focus. Discipline becomes virtue. Hierarchy becomes necessary. Obedience becomes survival. Children raised in high-structure environments internalize contingency quickly. Psychologists refer to this as high-contingency conditioning. Actions lead to immediate consequences. Rules are clear. Deviation carries visible risk. When your environment operates this way during formative years, your brain adapts. You learn to think ahead. You learn to control impulses. You learn that stability depends on discipline. That lesson does not disappear when the war ends. And here is where the misunderstanding begins. Many later generations interpret the silent generation's emotional restraint as emotional absence. But restraint is not emptiness. It is containment. The cultural environment of the 1930s and 1940s did not encourage emotional exploration. Mental health language was limited. Therapeutic frameworks were rare. Vulnerability was not socially rewarded. Composure was. Strength meant remaining steady. So they learned to compartmentalize, to manage emotion privately, to endure quietly. Modern research on emotional suppression shows that long-term restraint can build resilience, but it can also create distance in close relationships. That is why many people describe their silent generation parents or grandparents as strong, reliable, but emotionally reserved. The reservation was not indifference, it was adaptation. When instability defines your childhood, emotional control feels safer than emotional expression. Scarcity and war also shaped their financial psychology in lasting ways. Studies of individuals raised during prolonged economic downturns consistently show higher savings rates and stronger aversion to debt decades later. The silent generation is statistically more conservative in financial behavior than those who followed. They value savings. They avoid unnecessary risk. They are cautious about leverage. They favor stable employment over speculative opportunity, not because they lack ambition, but because uncertainty was embedded in their early memory. When collapse is part of your childhood landscape, you build guardrails. You do not assume stability, you protect it. Marriage and career followed the same pattern. For the silent generation, marriage was not primarily about personal fulfillment, it was about partnership and stability. Divorce rates among this cohort remained significantly lower than those of later generations. Career mobility was also lower. Leaving a stable job voluntarily felt dangerous. Security was not taken for granted, it was guarded. Community ties were similarly strong. Churches, neighborhood associations, civic groups, these institutions provided predictability, and predictability felt safe. It's important to understand that this generation came of age during an enormous transformation. They witnessed the rise of mass media. They saw radio evolve into television. They watched the United States emerge from depression into global superpower status. But their identity was not built on rapid reinvention. It was built on steadiness. They adapted to change, but cautiously. Efficiency mattered more than novelty. Function mattered more than spectacle. As the post-war economy expanded in the 1950s, the silent generation entered adulthood. They became teachers, engineers, factory supervisors, administrators, public servants. They did not dominate headlines. They did not stage cultural revolutions. But the silent generation laid the groundwork. They built infrastructure. They maintained institutions. They favored systems that reduced uncertainty, predictable schedules, clear procedures, defined roles. In organizational psychology, predictable structures reduce cognitive load. When systems are stable, individuals expend less energy on threat detection. The silent generation intuitively built environments that minimized chaos. Another defining feature of their psychology is delayed gratification tolerance. Growing up in scarcity trains patience. When rewards are not immediate, you learn to wait. Long-term planning becomes natural. For the silent generation, immediate pleasure was secondary to long-term security. But strength has a shadow. Emotional containment can limit vulnerability. Their children often experienced this as emotional distance. Containment protects it. Silence can be strength. Steadiness can be radical. And invisibility does not mean insignificance. It means someone else was free to move loudly because someone was holding the structure steady underneath. Generational psychology does not disappear. It evolves. And understanding where it began helps us understand why we think, save, speak, and protect the way we do today.